It appears that you're trying to be the premier sex trafficking
Of course
site
not, Senator.
in this country.
Senator, that's ridiculous.
No,
S-
it
Senator,
is not ridiculous. You
Of course
want
we
to
don't
turn
want
around
this.
and
We
tell
don't want
these
this
people
content
that,
on our platforms, and
why don't you take it down?
We do take it
We
down.
are here discussing.
We do
We
more
need
work to
you
take it
all
down
to
than-
work
than-
with
than-
us.
than-
No, you're not.
That was Senator Marsha Blackburn questioning Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg. Lawmakers grilled some of the top CEOs of social media platforms, saying that the platforms are not doing enough to protect kids online. It is a rare issue that's gotten bipartisanship in an otherwise gridlocked Congress. Leading the way on the Kids Online Safety Act are Senators Richard Blumenthal, a Democrat from Connecticut, and Marsha Blackburn, a Republican from Tennessee. Senator Blackburn joins me now. Senator, thank you for being here. So how would this legislation require social media platforms like TikTok to protect kids? Because these platforms, as you know, they're promoting everything from self-harm, eating disorders, drug addiction, and even sexual exploitation.
Yes. And what our Kids Online Safety Act would do is require them to have a duty of care. They would have to have safety by default. Open up the algorithms so that parents and kids can set those settings in place. And Kevin, keep that content from being fed to a kid. It would also give parents and kids a designated portal to report bad actors and adverse content. And then it would require the social media platform to actually take it down.
Senator, I mean, if Disney Channel or Nickelodeon aired a fraction of what kids are exposed to in these social media platforms, the FCC would have a field day. Lawmakers like yourself would have a field day. You would bring in the CEOs of Disney, of Nickelodeon. So why is it that TikTok, Instagram, Snapchat, why are these tech platforms allowed to do it, but Nickelodeon and Disney can't?
Well, and as we say, if a liquor store owner sold alcohol to an underage child, they would have the store padlocked, they would be taken away in handcuffs. Same thing if the Minute Market sold tobacco to kids, or if you had a strip club that allowed kids to come into their audience. They would all be dealt with. But in the virtual space, you have these platforms that think, since they do not have a physical presence, that they can skirt this law. This is why it's necessary to pass the Kids Online Safety Act so that they do have to meet those standards. We as society have decided children cannot be exposed to certain things, and children until a certain age cannot do certain things. The other component of this is the Section 230 protections, which through the Earn It Act, we're trying to take those away from these social media platforms so that they can be held to account by individuals, by families that have lost the lives of some of their loved ones, some children online.
Senator, you're talking about addiction. You're talking about addiction in the digital space. And we know this country has an opioid crisis. We know that unfortunately there have been hundreds of thousands of teenagers who have lost their lives from opioid and addiction. How would your legislation in the digital space, how would this make social media less addictive for minors?
What it would do is require them to remove this content online that promotes self-harm, that introduces kids to drug traffickers, to sex traffickers. They would be required to remove that. And they can do this. They know that they can do this. It is just they're choosing not to. It is the same thing with Zuckerberg yesterday in his response to me, Kevin, when I said, does not this violate your community standards and your terms of service? He didn't want to answer that question. He said, oh, we take the content down, but they're not taking it down. And you have hundreds of thousands of kids that are adversely impacted every single year.
So there are a lot of technologists who study logarithms and their impact on the society as a whole. And in fact, when bad actors like China, like Russia, are able to leverage those logarithms specifically against the United States. But you tackle, and Senator Blumenthal, in this bipartisan piece of legislation, you tackle a specific logarithm known as black box logarithms. So first of all, explain to our audience what black box logarithms are and how this piece of legislation would make them more transparent.
Yes, what we know that these social media platforms do is that these algorithms see what it is that you're interested in, and they continue to feed you more content. And in order to keep you coming back, then it is a little more seductive. It is a little more edgy. And they continue to run you down this rabbit hole more or less. Now, the reason you want to give parents the ability to change these settings and to alter the way these algorithms are feeding things to their children is that sometimes if it's eating disorders, if it is information on suicide, you don't want to keep pounding somebody with this information. And there's all this information that will cause self-harm. So if you give parents and kids the ability to work together and set those, then kids can say, I don't want to see this, I don't want to see that.
And their parents can say that too.
Prohibited. That's right. That's right. And then it will help to keep those kids safer online.
So respectfully, Senator, I have to press you on this because I know you and Senator Blumenthal have been on this, but I got to tell you, a lot of people ask me why, parents especially, why is this taking so long for Washington to wake up on this? I mean, parents around the country, especially during lockdowns, especially during the pandemic, had seen in real time their kids get addicted to these social media platforms. So why has this taken so long?
Yes, and we were talking about this in committee yesterday. Senator Welch, when he and I were in the House back in 2012, we had the first of the online privacy bills. And what you have is an army of lobbyists and lawyers that are paid for by these big social media companies that are making tremendous amount of money, because when you are online, you are the product. When your children are online, your children are the product. And right now, kids are spending about 8.5 hours per day on their screens.
Wow.
And they continue to fight us on this. At this point, we do have nearly half the Senate as co-sponsors on the Kids Online Safety Act. We've got over 200 organizations. It is broadly bipartisan, and we are hopeful that Senator Schumer will get it finished in the Senate and we can send it over to the House for passage.
Well, dare I say it's a nonpartisan piece of legislation as well. Yes. I mean, and with artificial intelligence and quantum computing and all of these new technological revolutions, this problem is only going to be exacerbated. And you mentioned this yesterday about Beijing-based ByteDance owned TikTok and the Universal Music Group pulling a lot of artists from Ariana Grande, Taylor Swift, Drake. Is this a good call? I mean, you've called for a ban on TikTok, for example, but do you think some of these companies like UMG, for example, are starting to wake up to the reality that they can't necessarily even negotiate on music, which is, I know, a huge issue in Nashville, in your state, and for your constituents?
Yes, indeed. We have great artists in Nashville, great songwriters. And when you cannot get TikTok to pay royalties for the creative content that these artists produce, and when you cannot get them to the table to negotiate to protect name, image, and likeness with the utilization of AI, and when they're going to continue to push forward unwanted content to kids, then I think Universal Music Group did the right thing in saying our artists will pull their content from your platform.
Who are you rooting for in the Super Bowl?
You know, I'm rooting for a good game.
All right. Would you be Trump's VP?
Oh, my goodness. I am running for reelection this year. I am going to do everything that I can do to help President Trump win his election.
Senator Marsha Blackburn dodging me on the Super Bowl and leaving that conversation for former President Trump open. Senator Blackburn, they're talking about her bipartisan piece of legislation as it relates to protecting kids online. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
And that's it for today's America's Vote 2024. Be sure to check out more of our reporting on The Hill's YouTube channel and thehill.com.